The Avalaunch transmission starts now.
All right. Looks like we are good to go. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep, I can.
Okay. Let's see. All right on. Well, everyone, thank you for joining. We have a special episode today, as far as I'm concerned, with a few titans of industry. We have Miko, from also known as
P2E, what?
P2E Analytics.
Yes, sir.
Miko from P2E Analytics, GameFi Hub, data analytics platform, which is particularly relevant for today's conversation. We'll get into some of that in a bit. And then we also have Melee and Theeban, which no BFG stream would be complete without the co-founders of Battle for Giostone. And we've been talking with these guys a lot and using BFG as the backdrop to cover a lot of like a broad range of GameFi topics. And I think it's been an interesting way to kind of go about this because we have this really cool MOBA that's about to come out, built by these very experienced guys, both in development and the gaming industry in general. So they've been able to offer some cool perspective while being able to promote a game that we're really excited about. So happy to have everyone here today. But before we get started, let's just do some brief introductions, starting with you, Miko. Why not?
Yeah, and I know where you're going there, Mark. Miko, and then I'm also known as Mardo in real life. But yeah, so my background is actually traditional finance. Before I jumped into Web3, I worked at an investment fund focused on venture capital and also private credit investing. But always been passionate about cryptocurrencies, Web3, blockchain technology. So came across gaming for the first time when I learned about Axie Infinity, dove deep into it. And to me, it was a perfect world because I love gaming. I've played games, especially strategy games as a kid. And I love economics. That's what I studied in university. I love investing. That was my, full-time job. So gaming sort of on the Web3 side brought all of these three together, right? Strategy, gaming, economics, investing. Actually, it's four principles. So I dove in, and then I started tracking the Avalaunch ecosystem, loved Krabata, analyzed the games via my Twitter account, and that's how I came across with the idea of P2E Analytics, which we started earlier this year. So excited to be here. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, right on, man. Thanks for joining. Mila, you want to go?
Yep, sure. So I might disconnect for if my internet is not good, so don't mind it. My name is Mile. We have been through like 2-3 streams with Mark and Avalaunch, and I'm the one of the co-founders of Battle for Giostone. My background, again, I studied web development, software development, and I have my own software development company, which we were working with outsourcing projects before Battle for Giostone was born. After Battle for Giostone was born, we switched our whole power to the game. We are developing the game. The team counts more than 40 people actively working on the project, and we aim to be one of the best esports titles here in the not just in the Web3 industry, but in the Web2 also, because we believe that what we're building have the potential to become big esports title.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Right on, man. Theeban.
Hey,
Yo.
most of the guys here probably have heard enough from me already, but I'll introduce myself once again. I'm
Do it again.
1437. You can also call me Theeban. I come from the Web2 world, professional or ex-professional Dota 2 player. I was also a coach, analyst. I did broadcasting work. Anything you could possibly imagine with esports, I've probably already done it at this point. I started close to 15 years ago. Most recently, I've been playing Axie Infinity I also won season 20 of Axie Infinity, and now I've moved on to Origin. I'll be traveling to AxieCon. That's why you might not see my face at the moment, because I'm in a really bad. I'm in a great hotel, but with really bad service, so I can't actually put on my camera right now to show you guys myself. But I am on the way to AxieCon. I'll be competing in their big event.
Cool.
Melee is also traveling there right now, so we're all going to be meeting up, and we're going to be heading to the Battle for Geostone offices after AxieCon. So I'm very excited about that too. But for
Nice.
BFG, I actually work on the game bounds, but I'm also a co-founder. I do a lot of other. I have a lot of input on other things as well, apart from just the game in BFG.
Hmm. Very, very cool. And it's interesting that like you guys are like right now currently traveling for Axie, um, like a tournament, and I think it's actually a good kind of frame to talk about some of the things we're going to be talking about later, which are, esports tournaments in Web3, how these things diverge or not from like traditional esports, and kind of like what esports even means. Like want to get I think like even a historical understanding of kind of what we mean when we're talking about esports, and when we have two, three people on that kind of come from different parts of the Web3 world. These guys are building a game. Miko has a platform and a presence that deals with analytics and community building and information and content. These things can feel like disparate topics, but I actually think there's a fair amount of overlap, if not just for the reason that both of these things kind of coming into existence and growing speaks to the like maturation of the industry as a whole, right? Because they're needed components. Um, so, Miko, I wanted to get started with you and just talk briefly about P2E analytics and the platform, and what it is and why you decided to build it, and kind of go all in on this. I mean, I know you personally, and I know this. That you working on this platform represented a big transition in your life and a big commitment to it. So I want to kind of give you an opportunity to tell people sort of what it is, and why you felt like it was really important and valuable to Web3 gaming to build now.
Yeah, definitely. So our tagline is we want to be your GameFi hub. And there's different ways to say this. And the reason we're calling it GameFi is because uh, blockchain games involves, finance, involves, cryptocurrencies, financial elements, right? Besides gaming. So as a hub, as a GameFi hub, we want to offer the gamer everything that they need to be a Web3 player or
Hmm.
investor or constituent. What that means is that they need to have data, ways to assess the game's economy's health, get insights and alpha about the game, discovering new games, discovering opportunities from an investment or on a gamer perspective. And then we have some other financial elements in our roadmap too that we want to include to make a whole hub for a player. And right now, when you go to our site, which is p2eanalytics.com, you see, our beta version. We have almost 1,000 game profiles where players can go and discover new games. We have data on a handful of games, which are going to be ramped up pretty soon, where we have data on more and more games. And finally, we have a news hub where you can find news on the latest games, insights, and research reports. And you should see a lot more from us this month. And in terms of from my perspective, like I said, I got into it because it kind of hit my passion points. It's related to economics, investing, and playing. And what sort of became clear to me as I was playing these blockchain games, and the biggest one that I was playing before I started P2E Analytics was Krabata. I experienced the same pain points playing Axie, playing Krabata, and some other games, which is lack of data, right? I couldn't figure out how much my NFT was worth. I couldn't figure out if what I'm paying right now is the right amount to get into the game. If the economy is sustainable, what the meta is, which NFT should I buy, right?
Right.
And then after I came across Krabata 2, it was tough to me to find another game as well, except for scrolling on Twitter or maybe checking Tap Radar. So I started, if you look at Miko's older tweets from my Twitter account, publishing threads on Krabata every week. And I would manually go on Avalaunch scanner, blockchain scanner, and enter the data in Excel every week, where it's the inflation rate of the token economy, the NFT population growth rates, player activity rates. So one can assess the health of the Krabata economy. So that got a lot of traction, and I saw based on that others experience the same pain points that I have.
Right.
And based on that, I had the idea of creating P2E Analytics, which is analytics focused exclusively on Web3 games.
Right. It was actually through those tweets, I think, that we ended up meeting, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. Because I mean, I remember seeing those, and like, there just wasn't a lot being put out that was like that, right? And it was like I was curious about how you were getting this data. Obviously, someone that was interested and invested in Krabata, which came through Avalaunch, and it was like, oh, this is a guy I want to meet. And from there, it's been a pretty cool relationship. And I'm definitely stoked on how far the platform has come since then. And when if you go to P2E, you'll see a list of games, essentially, games that you guys are covering, different content, strategy guides, different kinds of data about the on-chain data about the project. And I'm curious, like, how you are working with these teams that are listed there. Is this something that you are doing kind of actively together as a collaboration, or is it you just picking what you think is interesting and putting on the platform, or both? Like, how much do you need because of maybe gaps in on-chain stuff, from the teams themselves to make the platform at this point what you want it to be?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, but at this stage, it's more us doing the work on our own. We are collaborating with a handful of games, and but our focus now is setting up our foundation. And you're right, there's two types of data, right? There's on-chain and there's off-chain data. Right now, we're focused more on the on-chain data, and a lot of the insights that you need about a game can be found on the chain too, right? And the off-chain aspects could be more enhancing, I would say. But without the off-chain data, you could still make a lot of sense about a game with just the on-chain data. So right now, we're just focused on gathering the on-chain data and building out our platform that way. And once that's stabilized and in a good flow, we plan to reach out to more of the teams and then look at what kind of off-chain data we can incorporate, or get more insights from their perspective on what kind of data they want to see, their player base wants to see.
Right. And are there like any kind of really unanticipated issues or problems with this kind of collection of data that you sort of didn't anticipate when you were starting? Like, what are the biggest gaps so far that you're finding that you hope to resolve? And this is like, it's not like really specific even to GameFi. I mean, I think this is kind of a problem across a lot of crypto. I mean, we've come a long way, and there's some pretty robust platforms that allow you to dig pretty deep on chain and have really strong data sets that allow you to manipulate them, and like Nansen and things like this. These things do exist, but it's not unique to GameFi. But I do find that the things that people want to know about games, things related to like user activity and acquisition and contract interaction, it's just kind of thin and sort of spread out. It's like dubious. Like, is this even kind of accurate? So what are you finding are like the biggest gaps that just kind of aren't there, that again that you want to try and figure out and bring to PDE analytics as a platform?
Yeah, a lot of the gaps is what you brought on. There's quite a few analytics platforms out there right now, but they're not focused on the gaming ecosystem, right? And that means that they're very generalized. A lot of them actually put more weight on DeFi. Some of them are getting into NFTs, but it's more of your profile, PFPs, not necessarily
Yeah.
gaming. And the data that they're showing is different than what a gamer or gaming investor would want to see. I think you might be able to get some of that data if you go on these portals, but you'd have to do extra work as a user to get to it and get the insights. And what we're trying to do is just focus on gaming exclusively. And by
Mhm.
focusing on that, we bring the best insights, make it super easy for the user to get those, right? And if you go to our site, you're not going to see that yet. It's part of our roadmaps and our plans, and I think we should get there hopefully in the next couple of months. But that's and in terms of the gaps that we're seeing is there's still not a very a spot that brings all the gaming data together. Some of them may be focused on just the top 20 games. Some of them have data on everything, so you have to figure it out yourself on what you want to see. And finally, in terms of as a user, if you want to get the data yourself, there's third-party tool providers like Moralis and what have you. And some
Yeah.
of them we found out are not very well suitable if you want to have the specific customized data that you want. So actually we're building our own technology there too. And another actually kind of tough aspect that came up too is when you see games going on their own subnet or switching chains, right? That becomes
Right.
tough to marry the data together and kind of show the whole historical aspect of it. And finally, when we started P2E Analytics, a lot of the games, almost all the games were 100% exclusively on chain, right? So some of that activity has moved off chain. So it does kind of make it tougher to give some insights. But like I said, you don't really 100% need it. But if you get that, it's even better. So
Mhm.
those are some of the gaps that we are dealing with. And we have a way I think to go about it. But right now we're just focused on the on-chain stuff. And for example, now we're focused on C-chain and then one or two subnets. But as we build the foundation, we aim to cover it all.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of raises an interesting point because a lot of this stuff is off chain, some of it's on chain. Each game handles this in in a different way, and it's like a bit ironic because we're talking about this data kind of in the context of like a problem. But if you look at traditional gaming and these big AAA titles, like these things are black boxes, like you can't
Yeah,
necessarily get in there and poke around. And so it's we're already at somewhat of an advantage if this data is important to you, but people are kind of funny in that way where as soon as you give them anything or the ability to have it, like they're going to want more of it, and they're going to want better data, right? And
yeah.
so it's just very very human nature, like very crypto kind of stuff. But I do think that's like just kind of interesting to consider. Um, yeah, Theeban, question for you, and your experiences with Axie and like being a competitive player, and how you've achieved that, and like what your path through that looks like. Um, with your particular approach and strategy to Axie, especially when you started first looking at it, um, was there an element of your edge or your strategy that was related to data, analytics, on-chain data, or were you just going in there and playing the game as a player and just kind of gripping and ripping it? Um, what was your approach there, and was there any overlap to what we're talking about now?
Um, I mean, I think for any competitor, anyone who wants to be on top, or anyone who's, even getting into crypto in general, if you don't do your own research, you're never going to make it. It's impossible. And all this data and the abundance of data, I wouldn't say abundant of data. Actually, I always believe that we're always lacking data. For me personally, coming into Axie, for example, as a competitor, or even when I was playing Dota, like it was actually the most important thing. Research information on your opponents, gathering those kind of things.
Yeah.
When I first started joining Axie, I was looking at like, okay, what is the player base like? How much are they minting SLPs and stuff? Because I wasn't only coming into the game to play the game, I was also looking at the economy and how that would function, because that kind of influenced whether it's something that I wanted to get involved with.
Yeah.
But when it came to the game itself, I always, like, even being at the top, I always looked at what players are doing, what I believe is going to be the next meta. And the only way that you can
Right.
figure that stuff out is by the trajectory of the sheer numbers from everything that all the players in like the top 1,000, 10,000, whatever it may be, looks
Right.
like.
Right.
So most of even in games, like I would say, for someone who's at the top, talent, skill, understanding is one portion of it, but to be consistently at the top and not always have to rely on your talent, like you're gonna need to be well versed in understanding numbers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how available was that data? Was that like something that was easy for you to find, or were you having to like hack your way through it? Because would be like an edge in and of itself, right? If you were able to sort of
Hmm.
figure out ways to get
Yeah, I
access
think
to this stuff.
it's surprise. I mean, I wouldn't say it's surprising, but most of the people that are in the crypto space and the Web3 space, like they love these kind of things to begin with. So there's actually quite a few people who are creating great tools to analyze these kind of stuff, even if they're not really, heavily rewarded or something. They do it because they just, I don't know actually why they do it, but it's very helpful for me. Whenever I see these tools, I definitely use it, and I always try to find my edge over other players through things like this. Because most of the time, the people that I play against, or I compete against, they're typically playing just as much as I do, sometimes even more. I have a family, I have work, I have
Right.
like things I need to focus on. So I always try to see like, okay, where can I take my shortcuts to continue to stay at the top.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Um,
And,
okay.
and I,
Well, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Please jump
yeah, I was
in.
gonna say you're exactly right. It's amazing because when I was researching Axie, right, there's a whole host of resources and tools out there, and same for Kabata. People came up with their own sites, and out of for free, which is great. But to me, the pain point was finding those sites, right? Which one's good, which one's not,
Mhm.
and there was no one site that brings it all together under one roof. And that's what we're trying to build here too. But I agree, it's amazing how people are so giving. Even when I remember going on Discord, people would share their Excel sheets. Right, oh, here's how I do it. Here, and it was awesome. So I love that community aspect of Web3 games as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was funny because there was a certain point when we were like earlier on in GameFi or like Web3 gaming, when we were looking at games and we were looking at the community and whether this was something that we felt was like interesting or we wanted to maybe work with and put on the platform. Like one of the big things we were looking at was like how much was the community stepping up and digging out this data and presenting strategies. um, well, one, because that suggests like an active, engaged community, and two, it also suggests that there's enough going on within this game that can actually like withstand some critical thinking, investigation, and strategy, right? So that's kind of like a little true, less and less these days, like not entirely untrue, but back then it was like really, really important. And if we saw that happening, it was like a big kind of
Mhm.
uh, green flag, I would say. Obviously, not like the whole picture, but it was like a really, really positive signal that the community was kind of, or even an individual, was taking upon itself to dig in, get this stuff. Because again, it kind of hinted that there was something substantial happening here. Um, so with PDE, Miko, what's like the kind of grand vision here? It's still early days. what's the ultimate ideal, big vision for the platform? Is it to be something like a Nansen or one of these other like behemoths where there's just a ton of information that you can come in and manipulate, or is it more going to be this curated kind of experience for games, for individual games, or both?
Yeah, it's we're starting with the curated experience, and then as we get the data set up, we want to work on empowering the individual to pull together their own dashboards and data. So we want to have both, but our starting point and focus right now exclusively is a curated experience.
Got it. Yeah. Got it. Okay. So I think maybe we could like, transition this a little bit into the context of BFG, because I think there's like some kind of cool questions that again like crossover and overlap, and part of it relates to just data and the things that we've been talking about. But another just general topic that I wanted to be able to cover today was esports and tournaments and what this actually means and looks like, right? Because you can say esports, Web3 esports, and not that means I think a specific thing, right? There may even be kind of different like definitions of that. So I wanted to talk about and Theeban, you're kind of the perfect guy to address this. As you were going through Axie and the competitive play there, and I mean, would you consider those seasons like tournaments essentially?
Yeah, for sure. I Seasons was something completely different to me when I came into it. In Dota, we typically have like minors, majors,
Right,
leaderboard didn't really mean much except for something that you use to scout players out, and you would
right,
bring them on your team or something, and you compete. But yeah, when I came into Axie, there was like this leaderboard thing. They rewarded that, and that was their primary way to reward their players. But I also knew of their head of esports, Zayori. He actually came from Dota 2. So he was kind of like one of my bridges to Axie. I was like, okay, this guy
mm,
like left his nice, casting gig to go work for this company. I was like
right,
curious what it was all about. I wasn't really into like crypto and all that at that time, but it was something that interested me. And then when I came in, I knew like what he was working on in terms of like esports competition in the future, and it was something that I was quite interested in. I love strategy games, and it was like a perfect thing for me to kind of just jump into because I saw where Axie was kind of heading in terms of esports.
yeah, yeah. And so that leads me to my next question, which is like, in general, based on what's happened to date in Web3 gaming and tournaments, and the I guess kind of closing in on esports, because like we're not really there yet, but we're certainly very close. I think. Like, what is your direct kind of experience with those Axie tournaments, and how do they like specifically differ? I mean, you started to talk about it in the beginning of your last answer with the different actual majors and minors and things. But structurally, what are the biggest differences between how esport tournaments are run in the traditional gaming, Web2, whatever you want to call it, and crypto today?
I'd say crypto tournaments, these kind of stuff are just like in its infancy stages. Everyone's just starting out. Most of the people who actually compete in these games don't really understand how tournaments kind of work or like how these
Hmm.
competitions are supposed to go. So like the whole leaderboard aspect is quite easy for them to understand. It's like, oh, you place this high, you get rewarded. That's it. So
Yeah.
you just like kind of play with that. I think as time goes on, they will, especially people who are coming from Web 2 who are more familiar with it, will understand it better. And it's just a matter of exposure and time, honestly. Even for me, like I remember the first ever tournament that I played in, like 15 years ago, 14 years ago, whatever that may have been in. I was just confused, right? I was like very
Yeah.
nervous, very like oh, okay, do I need to be here on time? I can't miss a second and all that. Now I'm just like, it's just like water off my back, right? Like any
Right.
tournament, I just know when I need to be there. I know when I need to play. Being nervous or choking isn't really a thing anymore. So
Yeah.
I think it's just like that. It's just a matter of time for Web3.
Right.
We say this a lot. Everybody's early, but in reality, it is just is what it is, right? We are early in many different ways, as in like
Yeah.
you're not early because you're gonna make a bunch of money. You're early. It means that like you have a lot to learn from what's already happening. For example, other games. We just need to be able to go through that process as well.
Right. Right.
And I had a question that, Theeban, do you think, and let me know if this perspective is off base because you have the esports experience. Do you think Web3 game kind of democratizes sort of esports because kind of makes it available to everyone in an easier fashion in a way? Because for example, right, like in Axie, if you're a good player, just you have your MetaMask or you have your account and you start playing, and as you climb up the leaderboards, you get eligible for the seasonal reward. Whereas on the Web2 world, it's probably more of a formal process to be a part of sort of like an esports tournament where you can win a significant amount of rewards. Is that the right way to think about it, or is it super easy on the Web2 side too? Because to me, it's like you play if you're automatically on the leaderboard, right? And you get the seasonal rewards for doing good if you're a good player on the XC.
Right. I think you can do that in the Web2 world too. They just don't do it because of maybe some legal reasons or like all the trouble and stuff that they have to go through to be able to just reward random people. I'm not sure exactly why they don't do it, but I feel like rewarding people in Web3 is just so much easier.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I just love like where the future of Web3 is heading and how it is going to be the future. Like I feel Web2 and the way that all the stuff is structured there, it's like, you know, like prehistoric already. Like we just gotta move on. We gotta like get in with being able to pay out people directly in the Web2 world. When you're playing in a tournament, you win. What happens is the prize money goes to like an organization that you represent, and then they kind of like split the money up and send it to everyone. Where like here is like you compete in a tournament. I'm not talking about leaderboards or something. You compete in a tournament. Like the organizers can just like the tournament organizers can just directly pay the players, and you don't have to go through a shit ton of like, you know, hoops and stuff that you typically would have to, in the Web2 world. So obviously there's legal stuff that you still need to work with and make sure that's all set straight. But I feel like it's just a lot easier and very easy to track as well.
Yeah, and what I was going through is that the it's because esports to me it's like the competitive player, right? They want to their probably number one goal is to like really be the best player, and they get a reward, right? And Web3 enables that super competitive player that necessarily doesn't have the means to, let's say, travel to these tournaments or sort of be there during the or specific time of the tournaments. But if they're an expert player, they could reward it for these games. Because what I'm seeing, what the games are turning into is that, before all the games were P2E, any player will make money, even if they suck, right? But now some games are transitioning, only the great players make money, right? Or earn rewards or what have you. And sort of it becomes automated way. Like if you're a top player, you can earn that reward. Whereas before, if you're a top player, you got to find a team, get on the esports, get on the tournaments, et cetera, et cetera. So in the Web3 world, top players can almost quickly get recognized for their achievements and their skill sets.
Yeah, I would like 100% agree with that. I think the way that Web3 is just structured, it allows for that to happen, where you go through the time and how tokenomics work in the Web3 gaming is that you accumulate something, and this is like transferable assets. Where in the Web2 world, that isn't transferable assets. All the sweat, the
Yeah.
time, the skill that you put into it, like it just kind of soulbound into your account. You can't really do anything with it. And this, like you said, it allows way more people to be able to, um, you know, get something out of the time that they spend. essentially. You don't even need to be a top player. You could just be someone who's just played for like a year or two. You've accumulated something, and you can get like a small reward out of it.
Yep.
Yeah. Steven, I want to like get a sense of what, like, in your opinion, kind of like esports like actually is. Like, what are the kind of critical components here? Because a lot of people will talk about like esports and like bringing esports to Web3, but you know, it's not like, okay, you're running a tournament, now you have esports, right? So like what does at like a very baseline um, esports require to be esports? I mean, is it things like tournaments and like viewership, or like at what point do you say at what point do you move from, okay, this is a game and there's a tournament involved, to now we have esports?
Yeah, I think for me the two biggest elements is competition and entertainment. I think as long as those two can be there, then you can create or you can call yourself esports essentially, right? Like if there is a group of people who are like competing at the highest level and are able to have something to fight for essentially, and then there's also people who are very much willing to watch it, then there's a level of esports there. How high the level is, it's whatever they can bring in, but I feel like those two are probably the biggest elements for me.
Interesting.
Just like any other, I don't know, sport, essentially, right? Like there's people, NBA, right? We call it a sport because there's people who want to play and people who want to watch. Or esports, I guess, is like very much the same as that. I really don't even know how it came to be, but for me, when I hear that word, that's what I first imagine.
Uh-huh. Maybe like you could give us like a little like kind of like from your perspective like history lesson here, because you've been around for so long. Like, how did you watch like esports become like the behemoth thing that it is today? Like what was it like when you started, and then like over time, like what changes did you see? What kind of real progressions to make it this, multi hundreds of millions of dollar, $1 billion, whatever industry? Maybe you could
Right.
just kind of give us like a bit of a history lesson there.
Yeah, I think naturally as humans, we always enjoy games. It's something that passes our time, gives us entertainment. In the beginning, there wasn't a lot of people who had access to decent computers and who can actually play these games, like, for example, StarCraft or Warcraft. This is where most of these guys all started out. And through time, these games slowly but surely accumulated players. Most of the viewers who watch now, they're actually people who used to play back in the day, and they just don't have the time to do it anymore. So they just end up watching. Like I think I mentioned before as well, how Dota, League of Legends, CS:GO, I would say 80 to 90% of viewership probably don't even play the game anymore. Like as much as before. Maybe they might play once a week or like 2 or 3 times a month or something at most. But they
Yeah.
love the entertainment and being able to follow something like that. So in the beginning, like I said, people didn't have computers, but there were people who or didn't have good computers who can play games. And then as time went on, everyone's specs got better. And then at school, like after school, you used to always play with your friends, and then that just kept on accumulating. And nowadays, you got all the even like young children. I feel like there isn't a kid that I know who doesn't play Roblox, for example. Back in our day, like when we were in school, maybe there was like 2 or 3 guys in your grade who used to play Warcraft, right? And it's just like the narrative kind of changed at some point,
Hmm.
right? Where like
Hmm.
playing games wasn't something that was uncool, sort of say. It's super cool because you get to do something that y- is just really fun to play, and it's quite challenging as well. I think there's a whole nother story with like the education system and this and that, and how like it has limiters where like games don't have limiters, right? Where like you start a game, you finish one level, you can instantly go to the next level, you can go to the next level after that, or you play games where like they're kind of endless and you just like keep on going and it's constantly challenging and you never really hit like a ceiling, sort of say. Even if you're the best, there's always going to be someone better than you or there's something to learn. So that kind of like piques the interest of kids as well nowadays. And in general, games just got much better at creating stuff where you can just sink like thousands of hours in and you will never truly be satisfied or like move on from the game.
Right, right. And, and now that we have like a established kind of structure and precedent for what esports looks like, I mean, do you think, like your best guess, I guess, do you think that like Web3 gets to kind of skip these growing pains and progression and sort of just go, skip right to the good part, right? Or do you think it kind of it becomes its own thing and goes through its own slow progression and kind of finding itself,
Right.
and ultimately ends up kind of maybe looking a fair amount different?
Yeah. I think for the time being, it's going to go through its own progression, mainly because of the onboarding process is not as, simple as, okay, you download this, you play this for most of the games. You need like a wallet, you need to, get your assets and swap stuff and all this and that. And it's not as straightforward as Web2, and that's what everybody's used to. But I feel as time goes on, more people will find more tools to make it as simple as possible, as easy as possible, and then we will get to where the Web2 gaming is at. But at the end of the day, what's important is Web3 is just going to be like the upgraded version, right?
Right.
It's, for me at least, it's without a doubt going to be overlooking Web2 at some point, but it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, and I would imagine, and like you guys were kind of talking about this earlier, and just, you know, certain things that are easier to do, like issue rewards or whatever. Like I'd have to believe that, like blockchain and the kind of communities that exist around these games are going to create opportunities for esports, and these tournaments to, yeah, like, uh, be better, be more fun, be more productive somehow, some way. I don't know what those ways are, but if you introduce this new technology that has these like new sets of characteristics and opportunities, like it kind of stands to reason that, people that are interested in developing esports would find them and kind of build on top of them, ultimately leading to, yeah, exactly what you're talking about. Maybe a version of esports that supersedes what exists today. I would hope, at least. You know. Well, with BFG looking at, um, doing some tournaments here. Like there's some kind of like pre-alpha tournaments actually happening now, like bigger tournaments planned with, bigger prizes even as soon as, like, the end of this year. What are you guys doing as a team, and in terms of your planning to kind of drive BFG as kind of like a pioneer sort of in esports? Like, how are you guys thinking about, creating viewership, creating the structure for these teams to come together, creating prize pools? Like, there's this whole foundational infrastructure that's got to be done by someone first, right? And with Battle for
Right.
Geostone, it's kind of like the the mission here to bring esports to Web3. How are you, at least initially, like how are you guys thinking about kind of standing up some of these core components?
hmm yeah, sorry, I kind of lagged out for a little bit there, but I caught most, if not all, of that question there. Um, I think for us, we are using a lot of what we learned from Dota. We in terms of like the Web 2 world, we're also learning a lot, or sorry, we're using a lot from what we learned from Axie, for example. In the Web 3 world, we're kind of like fusing it together, keeping the good stuff, trying to work on it from there, and trying to do the best that we can to have this super fun to watch, entertainment like tournament structure,
Mm-hmm.
and something that's also fun for the players to play. I think the most difficult part with establishing this, esports game has always been the entertainment part for the viewers, right? Most of
Mm-hmm.
the games, like for example, card games like Axie, it's actually really difficult to watch because it's turn based. It's very slow. Like as a streamer, when you're streaming, you need to be the one that needs to create the content essentially.
Right.
Like you need to
Right.
hype up the game, even though like there's stuff happening on the screen is not that entertaining. MOBA games and shooting games, for example, they kind of create the content on its own because all you have to do is just showcase your talent. There's already a lot of stuff on the screen. You can literally not talk, and people will be entertained by what's going on there. So that's why with MOBA games, we kind of have that going on already, and then it's just a matter of us creating something that is a little bit flashy, very fun, and something everybody wants to be able to watch. And in terms of
Mm-hmm.
tournaments, it's entertaining to have these kind of competitions, something that everybody's fighting for, having champions, getting guilds involved, getting other esports organizations involved, getting their fan base involved in some way. And because of obviously blockchain technology, we can get these guys incorporated into our games as well in different ways. We can gamify, the ability to cheer for our team, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's different ideas that we have that are in the works to try and get as many people who are watching involved and be a part of our community.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, so makes sense. I mean, it kind of starts with like, well, first you have to build a game that's actually entertaining and worth watching, and everything else will sort of follow from there with the right kind of effort and with the kind of infrastructure that you guys are building for your own tournaments and esports. Is this something you anticipate that other games will be able to kind of come in and use and leverage? And is that something that you're going to encourage? Or do you want this or foresee this kind of being BFG, Battle for Geostone's own kind of universe and like walled garden? And I think either one is okay. I'm just curious of what
Yeah.
you guys think about it.
I mean, we're gonna be working on ourselves, but we would be very happy, at least from my perspective. Like, I would be very happy if there were other games in the ecosystem who are able to, do the same thing. Have some kind of a foundation for esports and have competitions and viewerships and such. Because what we need is actually to legitimize everything that's going on, right, in the Web3 space, because the more of that we have, the more people will be coming into the space. At the end of the day, we want to make people transition from Web 2 into Web 3, and we can't do that by ourselves. So eh, as many games as we can get, as many people who have the vision, who can build something amazing. Sometimes I sleep at night and I just think like, okay, we just need like one, Dota or one League of Legends or CS:GO, and that's all it's gonna take to just, you know, blow through this gate, essentially.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I tend to think so too. Um, Miko, I'm wondering kind of what you because you pay very close attention to this industry, right? On Avalanche and kind of everywhere else, right? Because like it doesn't just kind of all happen here. So just as like a more general question, like where do you kind of see this stuff going maybe in the next like 6 to 12 months, especially considering, where we're at in the market. Now we're sort of like in like a bear, and like retail sort of dried up, and some of the excitement's kind of drained out. But like from an insider's perspective, and certainly like what we see, like the work is not stopped, right? There's actually like a lot of interesting stuff happening here. Maybe a little more space, like physically and mentally, to actually do better work than tends to be possible in like a really hyped up kind of frothy FOMO market. So, what are you expecting, kind of hoping to see for gaming, Web3 gaming, that you'd be excited about seeing in the next, I don't know, call it up to a year?
Yeah, one of it is the caliber of games that are coming out. We started with a gamified version of idle games, and now the games that you are seeing are, a lot of AAA games that are in the works, right? So that could compete with stuff like Call of Duty out there. So I'm very excited about that because that attracts the traditional mainstream player on the Web2 side, right? That's one. The second is on the teams that are getting into this, they are known in the Web2 space, right? For example, Giostone team has connections on the Web2 side. Dr. Disrespect is one, as an example, right? He's a massive, massive a sort of celebrity in the esports arena in various FPS games, and he set up his own studio, right? Midnight, I think, games called, and he's developing a game that incorporates NFTs. And what's happening is free to play is becoming a big thing, like we talked about here too. A lot of the mobile games are there, which then you could transition those people into the NFT side of things. And what I'm excited about is that development there, because what needs to happen is you need to get a lot of eyeballs in the funnel, right? And then once it converts some of them into owning the NFT and in-game assets, setting up their wallets, I think that the experience that they will have there, then it was like, why would I ever go back to the old way of doing things, right? At least that's the bet. And if you think about it too, people spend billions of dollars. There's just like we talk about whales in Web3, there's whales in Web2 that spend tons of money on skins and whatnot. If you bring those whales to Web3 and then now they could see like their skin or what have you as an NFT, it's more like an ownership aspect too, and the rewards and other elements of blockchain games that wasn't really possible or not as sort of democratic as the other places. I think we could really capture market share. And we don't have to be 100% of the market share. We're still tiny right now. Even if we capture 5 to 10% of the 3 billion players out there, that's massive for our industry, right? So I think what I'm excited about is a lot of these high caliber games are still in demo mode, right? You can't really play them yet. I'm excited to see those launch, and I'm excited to kind of see the results, how much players are going to come. I mean, with the caliber games, there are Gunzilla, for example, right? Gunzilla is a gaming studio that is developing a game called Off the Grid. They raised $40+ million. I think they're going to be on PlayStation and Xbox, and they're going to have an NFT element to it too. Castle Crush is one, for example. It's not a AAA, but sort of a massive mobile game that has NFT elements. Those are almost guaranteed to have the attention of millions of players out there. Once they actually launch, I'm excited to see and hoping to see a good conversion there on the Web3 side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And we have as Avalaunch kind of like just an interesting kind of perspective, I guess, because we have the opportunity to work with a lot of these games and speak with them that are kind of building and yet to come, and like they're so different, and have so much potential relative to the kind of games that like we've seen so far. And these games, like some of them are a little far off, some of them aren't that far off. And I'm just so excited to see these things start to kind of hit the market, and there to be some real new blood in Web3, built by some really talented people. Like it's just I I know it's coming. You know, it's like it's just kind of just like sitting and almost waiting for all of this really 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 cool stuff to come out. And I think once it starts, it's like when it rains, it pours a little bit. And making a really successful, fun game, Web3 or otherwise, is a very, 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 very hard thing to do.
Yeah.
And so just because I'm excited about these games, or they represent new things in Web3, it certainly doesn't guarantee that these will be popular, successful games. There's a lot of misses, and these game developers historically spend a lot of money developing games that
Oh yeah.
ultimately sort of go nowhere. But I do think the fundamentals here that you can't get away from, around community and ownership, and economy. I just don't see how this isn't going to really kind of blow up at some point. I've used this example before, but I just still can't believe it. Like, I had spoken with a mobile game developer who's working on some stuff now on Web3 and Avalaunch, and they've, over the past 10 years or so, have developed a number of really successful mobile games, and they have individual players who have spent $1 million+ inside of this mobile game, buying shit, that's like just not theirs, just whatever, saving them time in the game, making them stronger in the game. But like, that's just, they don't, none of that is theirs, right? It just lends themselves to the experience they're having. And that alone, right? Like, you change that, like, you give that value back to someone, and then on top of that, figure out ways to share that value with others who are providing different kinds of value to the game. Like, just I don't see a world where that doesn't really fundamentally change things in a positive way. So who ends up making the strongest games, or when, kind of anyone's guess. But like, the foundational principles and shifts that are obvious and apparent, and will play out, like, that stuff is just so undeniably exciting, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we are coming up on an hour here. So these things always sort of naturally kind of find themselves at an hour somehow. It's like this really weird internal clock. Um, it's definitely no plan. But is there anything else that you guys wanted to specifically address here, before we kind of wrapped it all up? Is there anything that y'all wanted to talk about?
No, I'm good on my side. I think it's very great.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'll say is, like, for all those games out there who are trying to build something, I hope that they will all be able to succeed. I think Web3 is not about like it's us versus them or something like that. It's more like we need to collectively succeed, because we're trying to mainstream this, like get everybody onboarded, and we're at like at 1%. Are we at 2% of our capabilities? Like, I can't really quantify what that number looks like right now, but I'd say, like, we want to get everybody involved. At the same time, we really need to, like, the people who are just in it to, let's say, build something for the money or whatever. Like, I hope that people will be able to identify those and, like, kind of weed them out, because, like, those are the people that are kind of doing the opposite of what we're trying to build, right? Like, we need to legitimize the gaming in Web3, and that's, I feel like, the number one goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Couldn't agree more. All right. Well, cool. Thank you so much for your time, insights here, guys, today. For anyone that's watching this now or in the future, definitely check out these guys' platforms and communities. P2E Analytics definitely is um growing and evolving daily, and has a ton of great content and useful information right now for people that are playing these games. So definitely go follow them and check out the website. BFG, same thing. These guys are really actively engaging with the community at this point. The pre-alpha tournaments are going on right now. Check that out, potentially participate. But this stuff is coming up fast, so I would definitely encourage anyone who's like interested in it, wants to be a part of it, to follow, join, contribute. There's always opportunities to do that. Which is kind of what I love about this most. It's not doesn't have to be passive. It can, but you can always find ways to contribute and go deeper if this is something that you're particularly excited about or resonates with you. So I'll leave it with that. Thank you again, everyone. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to y'all soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.